Paul, there's been some mandates coming out from the federal government talking about, companies over 100 employees are going to have their employees vaccinated or provide negative COVID tests. What's the latest on this?
Well, it's taking some time for OSHA to draft the rule. So that's why we're seeing the president out there rallying the troops, so to speak, to get employers out in front of it while that rule gets drafted, because it is taking time. The soonest we'll see it likely is in 3 or 4 weeks. It may take longer, and then we'll see what legal challenges, arise after that. Some people think that employers, and some of the feedback we're getting from some employers is that they were in the process of implementing a mandate of their own, but they don't want to get in front of it because what if theirs doesn't comply with whatever OSHA comes up with, and they're going to have to invest the time and energy and money in reinventing what they already did. So in some ways, it may have actually slowed things down a little bit.
Oh, it's very true. I mean, it's kind of a different reality for depending on what kind of company you have. If you're a smaller company with just at maybe 100 employees, if a big chunk of them don't want to get vaccinated or come to work because not everyone is vaccinated, that could be very detrimental. That could shut them down. Not so much the case for some of these bigger corporations, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've seen United is a great example. I know I've seen in a lot of interviews people saying less than 1% of their workforce was affected. Well, actually, if you count the exemptions that people applied for and got, it would be 3.7% of their workforce. That's not a small number for any employer, and definitely not for a small employer. So many of them are struggling to hire. We're being told it's the toughest hiring environment in 15 years, and they don't really want to do anything to rock that boat. Many of these folks that are at the smaller end of this scale.
There is another wrench that has been thrown into the works here in Texas. The governor announcing yesterday that private companies cannot put in vaccine mandates, which seems to go directly against the president's orders for companies over 100 employees. What's a company to do? Which one do they follow?
I think what we're going to see is that until it gets sorted out legally, they're going to get to pick and choose. I think employers will pick the one that they prefer and follow that one. And they will have some cover likely from the confusion that's going to be created here. And then back to your point about smaller employers being impacted more heavily than large employers. What are they to do about the cost of testing? It's unlikely that the rule will allow them to pass that cost on to employees, but can they really shoulder that cost themselves, coming off of what for many of them has been a very difficult period of time? So I think maybe that was by design, maybe not. But some of these employers are telling us if they put in a mandate and they're responsible for the cost of testing, they may have to just simply put in a mandate and not make the testing an available option because of administration and cost and everything else that goes along with that.
Some of the Texas-based airlines, for example, American Airlines, have said that they are going to stick with the president on this one and make sure that their employees are vaccinated. That with this mix match happening between the governor and the president, that could affect some flights for this holiday season.
Well, we're already seeing it the last couple of days. Thousands, literally, I think thousands of flights, and it's not just in the past. We've heard some people talking about how it was the workers that had lower levels of education that were choosing not to get vaccinated, as if that was to imply, they didn't understand the situation. And yet we're seeing now that it's pilots, a very highly educated group of people that are saying, I don't want to get vaccinated. And we are seeing a significant number of healthcare professionals that are choosing to retire early or change careers entirely or resign because despite their high level of education, they're saying they don't want to submit to that mandate. So I think we should hopefully have a more intelligent conversation than just to say these people are not smart enough to understand that they need to do something they're told. I mean, there is this huge gaping hole in our conversation for some reason in this country where we don't seem to acknowledge natural immunity, even though there are literally dozens of studies, many of which have been performed by some really respectable institutions in our country that support that is a reality.
What about companies that will try to put in vaccine mandates that are even tougher than what the president wants?
Yeah, there are some. For some, it's going to be because they can't afford the testing. So they're going to say vaccine or nothing. And that's going to be an unfortunate stance for some because they're already in that tough hiring position that we've talked about. Some of them, it's just the way that the leadership feels and believes. And in some cases, that will work out fine. If you have, like where we've seen statewide mandates for healthcare workers, those have largely worked out in terms of the big numbers. Most of the healthcare workers, while there may be some protest, in the end, look at New York, they almost all get it. Because you're creating a situation where they really do have to say, I either get to continue to work or not. It's not like they can just go down the street. The whole state is being, mandated, all the jobs that fall into their category. Ohio, before the presidential mandate, we were seeing some health systems in some states like Kettering Health in Ohio were accounting for that natural immunity component that I mentioned in their mandate. That seemed like a positive move. It's the opposite of the question you just asked, but maybe a good part of the overall conversation. Some are going to be more strict. Some were looking to make some more accommodations if the science supported it and it made sense. And I think this top-down mandate has eliminated or slowed down some of that discussion that probably could have been positive in getting acceptance to happen more widely.
What is your expert opinion in forecasting as we go into the later half of the year or starting the new year soon with getting people back into the offices?
Well, we've seen an uptick this week. It's the biggest uptick we've seen for employees heading back to the office. But I think a lot of employers are going to allow some sort of a hybrid model. People have enjoyed the flexibility. And again, you have this tough hiring market. We're in the middle of this great resignation where 7 million people, I think, quit their job in July. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but that's happening. So you have this double whammy happening for employers where they are struggling like they've never struggled to get staff on, or at least not in the last decade and a half. So I think they're going to end up allowing a hybrid workforce to happen where they can get a little bit of both there. In fact, it goes back to our mandate question. Some of the employers that we're talking to are interpreting, their early interpretation of what's going on is that if key employees don't want to get vaccinated, they can be remote. And their position, at least for now, is that if they're not coming in the office around other people, then the mandate doesn't apply to them.